Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please raise your hands, those who don't have a hangover today. Wow.
I left early.
Oh, it's going to be a cool session. So I convey you a very warm welcome to our session, ENVRI-FAIR EOSC activities and collaboration with e-infrastructures. My name is Anca Hienola. I'm the co-coordinator of ENVRI-FAIR, and I will chair the session today. As you probably know, ENVRI has a very long history that has been constructed through 3 European projects in FP6 and Horizon 2020. These are the ENVRI, ENVRI Plus, and the current ENVRI-FAIR. All of them treated the development and sharing the tools amongst more than 20 research infrastructures in the environmental domain. However, unfortunately, ENVRI-FAIR will come to an end by mid-2023. So the question of finalizing the development of the tools created in ENVRI-FAIR, the ability of long-term sustainability of the main outputs of the ENVRI-FAIR, and of course their delivery to, or the onboarding of these tools to EOSC remains an open question. Also known to you is the fact that sustainability depends on many factors. And for example, the financial support for the follow-up, if it's going to be a follow-up, Jesus, I have a headache. I didn't even drink.
Water always helps.
So, anyway, political support, the capacity of each research infrastructure to support itself, but also collaboration with other entities, and in this case, I mean e-infrastructures. So the goal of this session is to illustrate a little bit the current status of ENVRI-FAIR and EOSC activities, the areas of potential collaboration between ENVRI and the e-infrastructures, and just to ensure that the contribution of ENVRI to EOSC follows the philosophy of EOSC Association, but most importantly also the needs of research communities. As such, for today, we have invited 5 distinguished guests who will share their insights and their ideas concerning these issues. So from EOSC Future, we have Ron Decker. The EOSC Association is represented by René Buch. Did I say correctly? Yes. And we have also 3 very famous e-infrastructures. We have Antip Ursula from UDAT, Tiziana Ferrari from EGI, and Natalia Manola from OpenAir. Equally distinguished is our coordinator of ENVRI-FAIR, the man who holds the reins of the environmental cluster, who will be actually our first speaker and who will give you a quick tour of the ENVRI-FAIR project. So without further ado, Andreas Petzold, the floor is yours.
Is this
yeah.
This number 1?
Yeah.
I wait until it comes. So the purpose of my presentation is to set the frame at the beginning, and first of all, welcome, and as well from my side, and I think I should use the microphone once it's working. That this session comes very timely, since we had a couple of sessions during this event where we saw the good progress in the development of a couple of components of EOSC, and now it's really the time that we give you a short tour. I mean, you may have seen some of the slides already yesterday, but at the end I want to point out where we need practical support from your side. But before that, I will give you some insights what we have done so far in the ENVRI-FAIR project, mainly in terms of building the ENVRI-HUB, and so that you get an idea of where we need the support from the e-infras for the long run. So I will be brief. Anka, tell me when I should finish, so I should switch on the remote control. So as I showed already yesterday in the plenary session, from the ENVRI community, we have identified 3 target groups which require different access environments. And we have first the scientific communities, which are our communities we already work with. So they, I believe, will use the traditional pathways into our resources, the data portals, the APIs, to go directly to the infrastructures and continue the way they worked before in the last years. Because you need to keep in mind that we speak of operational infrastructures which provide daily services. So we started into ENVRI-FAIR with operational, call it subsystems or individual systems. And the challenge was to bring them somehow together and to make them interoperable. But the precondition was the operational and running systems will not be changed, because that's simply not possible. Don't change a running system. So here, the scientists will refer to the traditional ways. What we add on top here, also in the framework of the hub, is cross-research infrastructure and cross-subdomain access. This is something which didn't exist before ENVRI-HUB started or ENVRI-FAIR started. We have the research infrastructures as potential consumers of our products and services, and here that doesn't mean data, it means knowledge and training resources developed by the individual RIs. So these have been pulled together and shared so that upcoming research infrastructures can build on the experience of the mature ones, and that we can provide our knowledge also to the outside ENVRI for other research infrastructures, because basically, at some point, most of us face the same challenges in setting up systems. So this is mainly to share technology, to share knowledge, and to foster the further evolution of the RI landscape. And finally, we have the EOSC users, which come via the new ecosystem. I call it this way. And we designed our way that they will access the ENVRI world via the ENVRI-HUB in a guided way. So that's why we set up a frame with filled by rich metadata, so that people can use a search engine to find what they need. And this is, and here the main purpose is that people can realize the complexity of the ENVRI landscape and can find resources from different RIs without the need to go to each single place individually, because we want to overcome that situation. So the ENVRI world consists of 4 subdomains of the air, water, land, and life subdomains, and we have a couple of research infrastructures in each of these subdomains working there since, some of them since decades, some of them since years. And you see here some numbers that we have, for instance, in the atmosphere. So I am from the Argos research infrastructure, co-leading that, and in the atmosphere, which is my home ground, we have 5 operational research infrastructures and in total 12 data portals. The terrestrial ecosystems and biodiversity domain, we call it here life, it's even more complex with 12 data portals and 7 operational RIs. So you see the big challenge to bring this together. And if you count the number of researchers, you see what we bring to EOSC. So that is the challenging starting point we went off from. The established solutions, as I mentioned so far, is that either scientists or users from industry approach each RI individually. So this is an example from the atmosphere domain. And we may have also users like Copernicus, in that case the atmosphere monitoring service. They also use direct access to the individual RIs. This is what is established now. Actually, in the ENVRI-HUB, we have built up cross-domain or intra-domain use cases where you can access data from all the participating RIs by one portal. So for the atmosphere data demonstrator, we have Damien Boulanger sitting here. So he developed that one, for instance. We have the Essential Ocean Variables Global product, which was developed by the marine domain as a single entry into the whole system of marine observation data. And we have the EPOS portal and user stories, and on the very diverse biodiversity and terrestrial ecosystems landscape, they are developing towards that. So we have not yet existing a broad access, but we build the foundations for that. So you see here also the different maturities, and the ecosystems part has most of the emerging RIs. So they had the biggest challenge, or they still have the biggest challenge. But you see here the concept. We develop domain-wise access or demonstrators where people can see the benefit of the data interoperability among research infrastructures. But we are still in one domain, but this is already a big challenge. And to make it even more complex, the whole thing should be connected to the European Open Science Cloud, that people or users can access the full variety of assets offered by the ENVRI community. And this is what we have built up as a demonstrator. And if you go to the demonstrator, which is not, it's still as a test version available, and we will notify you when it's completely launched. You come to a set of resources like the catalog of services, which will be the interface to EOSC. We will have the knowledge base where all the technology is shared. We have the training catalog, and we have the science demonstrators. These elements are there, and they are now more and more filled with content. And especially the science demonstrators, which they are in the heart to demonstrate the ability of or the plus, the add-ons, if you can install these data interoperability among the RIs. This you can see here with yesterday we had a demonstration of the dashboard on the state of the environment in the EOSC Future event, and I just mentioned the atmospheric data demonstrator and the ocean variables product. So you see here a bit the concept, how it develops. The ENVRI-HUB demonstrator will be launched at the end of the project. So it's progressing. If you have questions on that at the end of the session, ask Uli Bundke. Uli, raise your hands. He is the one who keeps all the strings together for the ENVRI-HUB development. Now this is where we are, and this is already my last slide because I don't want to make too many words here, but just pull together the needs. So where are we? So we have set up the demonstrator, which includes access to data and services via metadata search that is built. We have the science use cases and start to develop the virtual research environments as based on Jupyter notebooks. And the ENVRI-HUB demonstrator, which has been developed, is hosted actually by EGI resources. So on the EGI platforms, that is established, so color is green. We need to move to the next stage because this is an operator and it's not scalable. So we need to put it on solid ground to make it scalable so that you can digest more and more content. And for that, we need to develop a fully functional end-tier web application. So it's set up as a distributed system, and that's the only way to go. But we need to put it into an efficient framework. We need to further develop the virtual research environment frameworks based on the Jupyter notebooks. This is really pending here. This is a big challenge. Cross-domain AAI needs to be implemented because we have no individual solutions. They are compatible, but we have no overarching solution implemented. And the federated search needs to be implemented. So you get an idea where we need support from the ENFRAs. And especially on the catalog of services, this is designed as a metadata catalog. That is done. It's now filled with content. And the ENVRI-HUB contains by that information on data providers like research infrastructures, on provided services and on platforms. This is all there. It needs to be filled with more metadata. And here we started to map the individual metadata solutions to TCAT IP, which may develop into serif. And here we need further support in the metadata mapping to make it a broad and EOSC compatible solution. And particularly for the onboarding and service of the services and of the catalog, here we require support by the ENVRI. This is, so you see, it's all, the requests are all towards technical support in getting the connection to EOSC done. The individual data management system at the RIs, they are based on our own solutions, because we need here very highly specific or specified technologies, and this is implemented and running. And we need your help for building the glue between that and for building the interface to EOSC. That's what I wanted to say, and I want to hope it can kickstart a bit the discussion and give you an idea of our expectations. Thank you.
Thank you, Andreas. Our next speaker is does not need any kind of introduction. Ron Decker, the project coordinator of EOSC Future. Please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, and good morning all. It's a huge effort to be here for me, I think for you as well. I want to zoom out a little bit on this cluster or the other clusters. So let's see what's happening in this EOSC, which is also an ecosystem. So that's item one. I think we can learn a lot from ENVRI as you're dealing with ecosystems. The advantage of being in a last day is that all your slides have been used somehow, somewhere by somebody. So that gives me the room to focus on, I think, 3 or 4 slides. Just as a background, we talk a lot about EOSC, but let's zoom out and also discuss on the open science. Why are we doing open science? Originally, one of the origins is the issue about open access to publications, because the current system is not sustainable. Money-wise, technology-wise, there are a lot of problems, and it's about the transparency of science. You cannot get away with, I'm a scientist, trust me, believe me, this is what is the truth. In the Netherlands, they say, well, you're a scientist, that's just one opinion. And then you have to start defending yourself. So the situation is changing. Secondly, we have the data explosion. Everything is digital. In the 70s and 80s, it was easy to run a digital archive. I'm from the social sciences. It was just simple. What is digitally available, we store it. But then in the 90s, 2000s, everything became digital. So you had to decide what do we keep, what we don't keep. And the issue with social data is they get more valuable the longer the time series. So this is taking hard decisions and also adapting to this digital environment. And then the type of problems are changing. Sustainable development goals, people want answers from science, from researchers on complex societal questions. And finally, it is also because we can. We have this digital environment, we have the internet, so you can do science, you can do research infrastructures in a different way. And also good to recollect that we are talking here about EOSC, but the European Commission defined 8 pillars, 8 strategic items, chapters on how to do open science. And again, the challenge or the problem is these are interconnected. You cannot just do open data without discussing EOSC. You cannot do open access without discussing reproducibility. on data, sharing data involves the reward system. Why would I share data if my competitor gets an advantage in producing the next paper, which is the currency in the scientific system? So keep in mind that these are related. And I will skip this one. It is about the EOSC. It has the highest political attention. It is a web of research data. I still remember that the previous commissioner thought that with one push on the button, he would have access to all the data. And as Andreas said, it's a little bit more complicated. We have a story of this governance. There were preparations of the governance. We have now the EOSC Association in shape with the partnership. So, but I think René might introduce where the association is after basically 1 year of existence, and it's amazing to see where the association is now. On this one, I want to focus. It is we call EOSC the EOSC Future Project the system of systems, and it's good to realize what that means. And Andreas gave some examples. Each system within this, let's call it the EOSC, can and should operate independently. There are own policies, there are own data and software. It's also good to realize, I think, as it is an ecosystem, it has an evolution. It's not a revolution. It's not one push on the button and then it's there. It will grow. One characteristic number 4 is it's more about 4 is also about this growth, and new items will come, and it's difficult to predict which ones. I remember from the EOSC Future, we started with the core functionality that was described in the strategic document, the SRIA. Now we have a new project developing new core functionalities. So you have to make room for this and allowing to grow this EOSC. It is not on one location. It is a distributed system using different hardware, different software, and the challenge is to connect this and make this talk. That's the eye in the FAIR, this interoperability, which is extremely difficult. And one characteristic is also, we are not talking about huge software. Yes, it is big, but the data is much more massive, and it is about these databases and how we can reuse it. On the governance, you see 3 options, and I remember the keynote by the person from Roche saying, we built this. They had huge capacity, they had a lot of people, and I think they had one advantage. They had this directed governance. It is within a company, they could say, this is how we do it, and then you can move fast, I think. We are more in this federated system. It is, we have to connect, but governance-wise, it is by different organizations. Yes, they agree on the overall purpose, but participation in the governing body is more or less voluntarily. So you have to agree, and it's different from being one company. And the third one is virtual, then there is no governance at all. I don't want to think about that. You've seen this slide. This is for the newcomers. Basic components of the EOSC is the core. We have the exchange. We have an interoperability framework, which is very important because there you have the rules how to connect, how to talk to each other, and there are support activities including training, help desk, etc. I will skip this one. This one also very brief. Yes, in the EOSC Future project, just to remind you, it has 3 key items. Yes, it is the technology, but it's also the data content and the services, and it's to engage with the communities. If we don't have users, it doesn't make sense. If we don't have content, it doesn't make sense. We need to train the people, etc. So it is more than just a technology project. And this is revealed here. You see a lot of work packages on the technology, but also on the science, on the training. The procurement is the relationship with commercial companies, either as a user of EOSC or as a service provider. We have the user engagement, and the policy and strategy reaches out to existing projects, to the association, to the steering board. So everything seems connected. Perhaps this might be interested for the discussion, because I think it was presented by Mark van der Zanden already in the technical presentation. But here you see the types of relationships. And I think the relationship C and D are interesting here. D is about connections between the clusters. And there have been some examples already about collaboration, and I think Christos is running this in the science projects. And C is how the clusters can connect to the core. And here again, it must be beneficial for a cluster to connect. Basically, the question is also, what's in it for me? What brings it to me if I join the EOSC? I think that could be one of the key questions. And the other slide, and here I finish, is this was mentioned on the first day by the EC. We will be ready in 2025, and then I thought, well, what's ready? Because we are working like hell on realizing this EOSC platform, and I think it's the direction. If you start bottom left, you have the national service providers. Policy-wise, you go to national research infrastructures, national research infrastructure policy. You try to make the relations, have a policy, decide on where are the priorities. And these national policies, together with the national research infrastructures, they will lead to this EOSC. They will contribute to the EOSC. This is what you see in the partnership. On the other hand, starting left and go up, this is in a way ESFRI. ESFRI is running for 20 years, and it's bottom up. It is by the researchers, it's thematic, it's going international, and we've seen some very nice examples of ESFRI landmarks, new projects, the ERICs. And what you see is that we, in a way, invite the science clusters also to join the EOSC. So there are 2 routes to. All routes lead to the EOSC, I could say, but it is not without effort. We have to agree what are the benefits of joining, what are the benefits of having a national policy and upgrading to the EOSC, what are the benefits of a kind of transformation of the ESFRIs, the international infrastructures, towards the EOSC. And that could also be part of the discussion. I'll stop here, and thank you.
Thank you, Ron, for a very nice presentation. Next speaker, the representative of EOSC Association, it's CTO René Buch.
Thank you.
and thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you. I will do a short introduction of myself because I'm people might consider me fairly new to this community because I joined EOSC Association in February this year. But I actually watched it on the sidelines as CEO of Nortonet since 2015, where we had the first communications with the Commission around this. It was also nice to see that the recommendation we gave the Commission, they were grossly overlooked, but it's part of the reasons why we are in this situation here today. So, and as Ron says, all the slides that we're going to see somebody else has been using before you. And I'm glad I'm not the last of the people here, because some other things I'm going to say is probably be stolen from others. I think for me the importance is that we are the cross-cutting, or EOSC should be the cross-cutting data space for research and innovation. But it's also important, at least for me, that apart from what I've been doing in the research and education area, has also had the pleasure of having quite a long background working for commercial companies in that sense, that we also bridge the gap between science and innovation and how we actually put this to the best use of our community. This is a very frequently used slide of ours in that sense. I think it's important as an input for what we are doing in that sense, because this is a plethora of requirements that we are trying to manage. And I'm going to skip some of the first slides quite quickly, because this is not a product. This is a journey, and we are going to get there in. But it also a change. One of the most important things that are part of this one is this is not about storage. This is not about computation. This is not about networking. This is not about specific systems. This is about a way of working, and all the others is just instruments to achieving that goal. Personally, I think we have a tendency, at least when we come from research infrastructure, maybe focusing a little bit too much on the technology and the service and a little bit too little on the culture thing, because one of the biggest challenges I think that we have looking at this change from science as is to science as will be, is humans are inherently conservative. That we are having a tendency to work like we've done before. We don't like big changes. We also have a tendency to think that our little world is the only one and the other world is inferior to what we are doing. And I think that is a thinking that needs to change. It's a cultural dimension that we need to change in that sense. So I think that's an overlooked point of view for how to do that, and with a lot less focus on the technology. So engagement, I think, is important. Watching this from the sidelines since 2015, and also being one of the early members of the EOSC Association, at least as an observer in my previous job, and maybe because of my commercial background, if I'm appalled about anything, I think it's not the lack of communication between people, but the lack of coordination. And when I think the lack of coordination, it's not that we don't talk to each other, not that we're not trying to align, but a coordination towards what we want to achieve. There's a great vision, but I'm missing being also used from the commercials, that you agree on a goal, you define a strategy, and then you execute and go along that line. We have a tendency to go along many lines, not necessarily leading in the same directions. And I think that is something that we will have to improve upon. This is a multi-stakeholder approach in that sense. And there's always a subtle balance between centralism that makes things easier, aka sudden, very large Asian states, and decentralism, which makes things very democratic, but also exorbitant, complicated to do. So I think we need to find a path around that. So part of that introduction is because this is one of the things that we're trying to do, is that I've been pushing, Ude's been pushing, Carol's been pushing very much for also start working on a strategy. So that we started in April, because one of the first questions I kept getting when I was talking to people, especially on our task force, is what is it that you want us to do? Where do you want to take this? And I said, well, I can have an idea, but it would be really nice if these guys and girls would have an idea. So this is an ongoing process. So this is the current status where we are. We divided into 3 different things. What? The ENVRI-FAIR data, and why we are doing it is also quite nice. Unlock the full potential research data to accelerate discoveries and innovation. I think that was key, and we had a number of sessions that led to this. And then there are 3 pillars that it all relies on, is on the how. And it's on the access and interoperability of data. I'm not going to go through all of these because you can read them afterwards. But it's important that we look at the data, how we process the data. I think one of the key things I also heard looking into ENVRI-FAIR is that data needs to be machine actionable. We simply cannot, as human beings, even though working in big groups, we need machines, we need AI to process those huge amount of data out there. And I think we need to enable new scientific discovery methods that is looking at data in a different way. Some of the cluster projects are already looking at that, and I think we can learn a lot from that. And I think one of the things for being a participant in many Horizon 2020 last effort conferences in that sense is, how does we make this sustainable? Personally, I don't think we can make this sustainable by having a pearl string of projects that's run in 3 years or procurements that run in 3 years. I think we need to look at this in a much different fashion. We need to look at the community and see who does what, who does it the best, and then stop duplicating effort and focused on that. Because, and I said that several times, we are not shy of things to do to make this happen. We need everybody that works in this field, but I think we also need to maybe point people in a certain direction. We need to inspire people, and we need a robust governance. A robust governance, I think, is one of the things that we also talked about on Monday in one of the closed sessions, is how do we get this involvement also of the countries? It's very much been the Commission, and at least some of the countries I used to work for is like saying, well, we're going to participate as long as they don't start putting too much requirement for us to put money on. And now they say, so, well, you can do in-kind, but we also need money from you. That's a whole different type of process. And I think we have a rather short deadline on this, because the Commission also have the cycles, and we need to prepare for what happens for the next cycle. So I think it's time. The next 2 years is really where this needs to mature and become much more structured for the future. Okay, one of the things I also want to trust, the brain trust of EOSC Association is definitively our task forces. But coming in from the side and being told, hey, can you give us an overview of the 13 task forces and what they're doing? I says, of course. And I went in and started reading all the papers, and I got really tired. Not because it's bad work. On the contrary, it's an immense amount of work, but it's structured in all kind of different directions, because the EOSC Association was not looking far enough ahead to say that how do we actually extract data for this? How do we share data across the task forces in itself? So, so what we are trying now is actually trying to put a lot more structures around that. We are trying to define key focus areas and cross-task force communication. We're looking at a quality review process so that we ensure that there is feedback to the task forces. So, and that might sound like a little thing, but trust me, having 13 task forces, roughly 30 co-chairs, and 450 people trying to work in the same direction is not that simple. So this is part of what we're doing. One of the reasons for that, I keep talking about strategy, and our friends in the Commission and the countries are looking very much towards the SRIA and the MAR. And it seems like the goal for when we are revising the MA is changing all the time. Now it looks like we need to do a 25 to 27, a 3-year one, and not a 2-year one like the one we've just been doing. But this is one of the major revisions that we also need to do within the next couple of years, and it's not a trivial task, because this is going to the basis of towards 2030 and how we are actually going to implement this. So this is going to be a key task for us, for our task forces and everybody in the community, because it needs a lot of consultation. So you probably heard, and many of you are already on the forum, it's one of the initiatives of many that we've been trying to do, is trying to get away from mailing list terrorism, where we have, no thank you, this is due to other things. And I'm not COVID, so you don't have to be nervous. Probably the reminiscence of a COVID a long time ago. But the EOSC focus, getting back to that one, is that we really need people to interact much more closer on a day-to-day basis directly with each other as a community. That's what we're trying to build. That's why we're focusing both around the task forces, the Horizon Europe projects, and principle, we can take this anywhere. We just passed the 500 user mark yesterday, which is a bit of effort, for this was something we set out to do during the summertime. So this has been pulling some teeth, to say the least, but this is an effort also for people being able to communicate better and being better at talking directly to each other. And because I spoke to some of the co-chairs, as also says, well, I mail out and I get very little responses. I don't know if they're dead or if they're alive or if they read it or not. This is supposed to be much more interactive. But of course, I'm also not naive. I've done these type of things before. This requires a lot of work, so we need to put some efforts into that. So one of the other things that we've been doing a number of tripartite event. And the reason for that is, I think it's important to wake the countries and get a strong foothold and strong anchor in the country for what we are trying to do. So we had a number of sessions, a huge number of sessions already. The people from EOSC Association that has been doing this has been really having a hard time, but we got really good feedback from the tripartite events, and there'll be further onwards also, because the involvement of the member states are important. So far, a bit of statistics. We've been in 16 countries. We had 151 speakers and over 1,200 attendees. So I think that has been a good meetup, also because this has been in collaboration with the countries. So I will wind this up. What task for us to do? Develop and not develop in a sense is not that we're going to program it in the same fine, but we need to also find ways of how can we govern the federated core and manage the AI. I think you also talked about that. I come from the community where we've been told for many years that if you're just on EduGain, all your problems solved. Implementing the EOSC forum using EduGain has clearly demonstrated to me that that's not the case. So I think AI needs a big priority, because one of my main thing for this is not being done for us. This needs to be done for the users. We need to focus on the users, and I deliberately say users and not just researchers, because I think EOSC should be much broader than just the researchers. So we need to focus on the users. And you all know that if you go to a homepage to try to find things and it's bleeding difficult to get in, you give up and you leave. People's threshold for bad experiences is very low. So there's a number of things we need to work on this one here, which also includes policy and a number of other things. So giving the time, our technical priorities for 2023-24 is to work together with the Commission and the stakeholders for the core creation, interoperability and data search, and quality. We're going to do a lot of member state involvement. We're going to look a lot of focus on funding and resourcing model, and we're going to look a lot on skills and recognition. And I think one of the things that we need to be very good at doing, also preparing for 2025, where the next work program is being put in place, is to extract the good cases that are already out there, the ones that are done by ENVRI-FAIR and all the other cluster projects in that sense, to demonstrate that this is actually worth it. You talked about Roche. Everybody talked about Roche. Well, Roche has the advantage that of the decision process. Trust me, I worked for 3 different multinational organizations. The amount of politics internal can definitely compete with what we have here. So it's not as easy in that sense, but at least what they have is a common goal. They want to make money. They want to get to a direction, so they put a strategy in place and they implement it, which is probably where we could learn a bit in that sense. But I also think we have an obligation to demonstrate that this is actually worth it, because otherwise we cannot sell it to the countries, we cannot sell it to the Commission for the next framework. So this is our work plan for the next year. I don't know what happened there, but you can look at that in the presentation. We have 3 focus areas of partnership: EOSC Focus and the EOSC Association in that sense, and you will probably see one of the things that are major in there is supporting the task forces, get an ESFRI research infrastructure working group together. We have a couple of practical things in that sense, but also having proactive engagement of the membership, and keep broadcasting, being the voice of the community, and demonstrate the achievement of our members, which hopefully will increase also with the research infrastructures. So this is an exciting journey. We will not be short of things to do. It will be complicated, it will be difficult, but I think it's also very exciting to be a part of. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity.
I have a question.
You always have a question.
Yes. so I really like what you said, what you presented, but in the beginning you talked about sustainability and about business models, but I didn't see them in your action lines anywhere.
In my action lines in that sense, which is, and if you looked at, well, they are below that. One of the reasons why I didn't put them specifically there is that if we look at the outcome of the tripartite meeting the other day, and one of the things that has been going on over the summertime, that we together with the Commission has come up with a reflection paper of different models in that sense, that is now out for consultations, and there will be a lot of more debate about that. So there's many things are in the air, so we need to define that. I think Niklas yesterday said this is not a business to consumer, this is a business to business, because it is for the research infrastructures, for the user communities to take the last bit in that sense, and we need to find out how we do the support for that. A sustainability and sustainable governance is a complicated thing to put together. So, and we need the buy-in from the countries, because also the countries need to provide funding. And that's going to be a hurdle. I think we will get there. We see Germany, we've seen a number of other countries, Holland and others, that has already taken that. Then there's a group of countries says, well, whatever we have national, we'll do in kind. I don't think that will be good. No. I'm convinced that that will be not good enough to achieve what we want to do. So we have a selling there, and that's also why demonstrating why this is good, why it's important that we can demonstrate the results, and it actually makes life for the researchers and the community better, I think is essential to get that backing.
Fully agree with that, but the question here is, I'm taking the example of ENVRI-FAIR. What Andrea said is, after a 15 to 20 million project, at the end they're going to have a few really, really nice things, but there will be in pilot, this is what I heard, pilot. Yeah. So how can you move along to satisfy the researchers if you don't have this capacity to move forward?
I totally agree with you. As I spent 30 years building infrastructures in the commercial and the public sector, and this is one of my frustrations. That's also why we spend a lot of energy with the Horizon 2020 project to document the key exploitable results, because too many things are falling between the cracks. Something will have to fall between the cracks. We got 136 curves in that sense. We cannot pick up on everything. But this is part of the big task we have, and I think it's one of the big tasks that we have also with getting the Commission and the countries to understand that this needs to be a longer-term structure. We need the funding, we need the background for it, because we cannot do production and take over very good software, very good tools, and then 3 years later we'll be in exactly the same situation. It doesn't fly. Also, and I'm sure EOSC Future is battling the same with the other things, that you have something you're supposed to deliver during next year. How is that being put to life? Will the procurement support that? I put in a significant, I probably contributed significantly in that sense, but we put in a lot of questions and a lot of suggestions. I think we had 40 questions and 16 pages of suggestions that we sent in, because I didn't done procurement for really many years in that sense, and I also took the procurement to some of the vendors that I know in the private sector, and they basically says, we cannot see what they're asking for, it's not quantified, it's not very clear, for 3 years, and for that amount of money and that broad formulation, not interested. And I think that's a mistake. Not that everything needs to be done by the commercial, but that we don't have that clarity, that it's very clear what is needed. I think that is a problem. And that brings me back to one thing, and I'm going to shut up because otherwise nobody else will have a chance. I think this is a key thing, because we have the big discussion about, yes, but my tools, my services, my software is on TRL 5 and 6. But my experience is taking a product or service from TRL 6 to TRL 7 and 8 and 9, the gap there is enormous, because there's so many things that needs to be put in place, and there needs a structure to handle that. I think that needs to be put in place. If we don't, I think we will not have success of this in the end. So I don't think we have a choice, but we have to define that.
I'm sorry, I have to...
Yes, I'm sorry. That's how I always ask very broad questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, René. Now we are moving towards the last 3 presentations from the e-infrastructures, and I'm just very much afraid that we will not have time for discussion, which I was hoping very much. I sent you some questions, I think, yesterday, and I would like to ask during your presentation if it's possible to concentrate on 2 things. What is the best and most efficient way of collaboration between ENVRI-FAIR and e-infrastructures? And the second one was, what is the added value that e-infrastructures are bringing to ENVRI? If that's okay with everybody. Okay, so coming from Finland, CSC, the head of secretariat of EUDAT, Antti Pursula, please.
Yep, thank you. Very nice to be here this morning telling about the EUDAT services. And okay, I'll try to focus in my slides a bit on what you asked, Anka. Thank you. Okay, so yes, I'm coming from CSC, head of secretariat of the EUDAT. Does this work? Yes. So I'll start with very briefly introducing what EUDAT is, but I hope that there is some information already before, or then you can go and see the links I have in the pictures. So EUDAT is one of the major e-infrastructures in Europe. We focus on research data management services, so that's our thing. And according to our vision that you see here, we are operating and providing a set of services that are interoperable and that serve research communities on different parts of the research data lifecycle. the EUDAT infrastructure is composed of members who are 27 at the moment. They come from 17 different countries in Europe. So it's fairly large consortium working on these services and our vision. And this slide, I just wanted to show that EUDAT has been there for a while already. So the first consortium came together around 2009, and then after some iteration, the first EUDAT project was funded or granted in 2011. And then in two dedicated EUDAT projects, those services and the service portfolio was developed. And then at the second project also there was emphasis on making the transition from project-based organization to a sustained infrastructure consortium. And landmarks there are this CDI partnership agreement. So CDI is the collaborative data infrastructure. So then we had the contractual framework that the consortium was formed. And then another thing worth mentioning is establishing this EUDAT limited company in 2018, which then can act as the legal entity that represents the infrastructure. So EUDAT company can make contracts with customer communities, with users, or it can be beneficiary in a new project, and so on. So this is why I saw this kind of the history part as well, and the previous slide, it is also part of our sustainability. So it's a network of well-established local and national data centers and organizations that have been there for a long while and who have voluntarily come together and formed an infrastructure to provide the services. And also the fairly large number of organizations means that there is some redundancy. Even if someone would have maybe difficulties in funding of EUDAT activity for some time, there is still the 26 other centers who can work on the topics. So we have a sustained organization that is continuous and set of operational services. Speaking of the services, they are shown in this slide. These are the main services. We have branded them with the names B2, so EUDAT B2Save, EUDAT B2Share, B2Find, and so on. I'm not going into details, there is no time for that, but the services can be used as a, let's say, standalone one, so you take one service and take benefit of that. For example, let's say B2Share for data repository, or you combine them into some kind of a more complex and comprehensive solution for use case. And the several different arrows with different colors are a sign of the interoperability and interfaces between these services. On this picture, I wanted to show a kind of a, let's say, a schematic research data life cycle or research process, and how the EUDAT services fit into this picture. In this very simplified picture, you have on the left, you have data generation, for example, data coming from sensors or monitoring also, or computing, or a combination. And then when the data is created, we already have then those services from the EUDAT portfolio. Then there is more on the right-hand side, there is data processing and analysis. So data is not only stored, it needs to be used and hopefully several times. So the EUDAT services have plenty of interfaces that can be then easily used for transferring data back and forth between EUDAT area and computing, for example. So our services are there basically in the FAIR data part of the picture. So they support or enable the FAIR data management of research data. Also you can, now I'm also trying to focus a bit on ENVRI here, so you can also consider some of these blue boxes that now in this picture are EUDAT services. You can imagine an ENVRI portal there, or something from the ENVRI-HUB. So it's not only that they work among between themselves, but you can use EUDAT as a back end for a community portal, or you can harvest the data from a community portal to EUDAT catalog and so on. So there is really a lot of options. So you are probably now very interested to see more about the services. So I point you to the EUDAT service catalog. This is the front page. So it's eudat.eu/catalog. And eudat.eu is the website anyway where you find a lot of information. And from the service catalog, when you select one service, you get then all the key facts of this one service in one place. This, for example, is Be the Drop. And this we have actually redesigned quite recently to be matching the EOSC, EOSC model, let's say, data model, so that the same information then goes to the EOSC marketplace. And we even have something called resource offers, so there's kind of a pre-defined package of how this service could be used if you are a small team, or if you are really a professional infrastructure looking for a solution. So you can select which type of service offering is more suitable for you. Same information available in EOSC Marketplace, as I said. So we are very much supporting the EOSC ideas, EOSC vision, and want to be part of this. One example, very schematic in this picture, it comes from the ENVRI area, from ICOS infrastructure. And shows that how these EUDAT services can be combined with infrastructure services and with each other. So at the moment already data from ICOS, from the carbon portal, comes to B2Safe EUDAT storage at CSC in Finland. And then in this DICE project, I have a logo there, we have defined a pilot case where the plan is to replicate the data in another place, which would be in Germany, in Jülich, and then later on also publish data sets that are coming out of processing this, let's say, the raw data. And then the publishing would happen in B2Share, and then metadata harvested to B2Find. But this part is work in progress, and it's part of a project called DICE, which I also wanted to mention. It's ENVRI-EOSC 7 project, and maybe the point why I mention is that it has the same timeline as your ENVRI-FAIR. It ends in June next year. But in this project, we can provide services free at the point of use, meaning that now is a great opportunity to test and pilot some new integrations, new testing for services. So yeah, this shows all the service providers that are part of the DICE project. It's the core is EUDAT, but there are also other service providers to make sure that we have a wide enough offering for use cases. Right. So DICE project is available for piloting. It's due to the rules, it's only for so-called new users. So we cannot much. It's not for those who were using EUDAT services already before the project, unfortunately. Okay, this slide is just. I wanted to emphasize that EUDAT services are horizontal services and generic. So they are really for all science disciplines. We do have possibility to customize, for example, adding more metadata fields for a certain community or research infrastructure, or doing some integrations and so on. But in the essence, they are generic services for FAIR data management. And then one more slide. So how do we operate? So of course we provide some free services which are limited in scope and can be just used by self-registration. And then we are working in EU projects which are typically onboarding new new user communities, piloting, and of course developing the services. But then when it's really about the professional service that probably ENVRI also wants to have, we offer service contracts. So it's simple. So you get sustained service if you pay for it. And I know it's not always the easy way, but that's what we do. And here, okay, this schematic shows that you, in the place of customer, you can imagine a ENVRI research infrastructure. Infrastructure does a contract, service contract with defined service level, data protection agreement, all of that, with the EUDAT limited company. Customer, the infrastructure decides who are the end users who are allowed to use this service. And then the actual service is provided by one or several EUDAT members. So not the EUDAT company is only kind of a broker there in between, so that there is one body to make the contracts with. So this is a way of getting, let's say, professional services. So I want to repeat my key points. EUDAT is a sustained and operational e-infrastructure for fair data management. We are part of the EOSC exchange, and you can use services one at a time. You can make a bundle of several EUDAT services, or you can combine them with the community service. DICE project is still there for some time to facilitate piloting or testing, even small developments to get the work running. But then at the end we offer service contracts for research infrastructures. Thank you, and I hope I didn't go over my time.
Thank you very much. Let's rush a little bit. Director of EGI, Tiziana Ferrari. Thank you.
So for the sake of timekeeping, I will not go in the details of what EGI is, but if you're interested, I will be still around in the coffee break to give you more information. And I like to just focus on the collaboration options that Andreas brought up in the first presentation. Of course, a lot has already been achieved in the context of previous ENVRI projects, but also in the context of EOS Future, and we have tangible results. I think this workshop is a good opportunity to start the planning ahead and see what are the opportunities, and I like to really go to the specific points of collaboration that were mentioned at the beginning. So one of the aspects where we as EGI Federation, which is a federation, international federation of research data centers worldwide, is to provide the ability to support open science by opening national infrastructures internationally to allow ENVRI-FAIR virtual research environments to scale up and reach out to an international user base. The EGI Federation delivers computing and storage as a federated platform, connecting nationally funded multi-purpose data centers, but also thematic research data centers and their data holdings. And the reason why we are a federation is because for many sciences, you cannot effectively bring data to centralized computing platforms. You have to compute where the data is hosted. And by adopting a federation, you can easily do that. EGI supports data-intensive processing and analysis by federating also research data centers. So communities, for example, like EMSO, CDataNet, etc., are already a bit like EUDAT presented, bringing their own data resources and, where available, their own computing resources into the platform. By connecting national infrastructures, we have a sustainable way to scale up ENVRI-FAIR users because all the user communities that would be external to a given array or who wanted to integrate data from multiple arrays in ENVRI can use national infrastructures or their own in-house infrastructure to compute and process this data by instantiating, for example, Jupyter notebooks in their own research data center by federating it in EGI, or by mirroring the data and caching the data into a federated platform or a national infrastructure in EGI to do that. So it's a very useful instrument to open infrastructures, meaning being able to deliver transnational access when you want to support users beyond your reference user community. We have been doing this already also for other sciences at larger scale. For example, in structural biology, by connecting data centers in the Asia-Pacific region, North America, Latin America, we can support up to 35,000 biologists worldwide. And we do this because we have resources coming from multiple funding agencies in Europe and beyond that. So I like to bring this example of the ENVRI-HUB that was already presented. Already Andreas mentioned this is hosted in the EGI Federated Cloud, which is the only and largest research cloud federation in Europe today, also connecting to China and South Africa. What we can do is, besides the hosting of the hub, also to support the VREs that will be based on Jupyter Notebooks technologies, for example, to be integrated with your specific AI modules or specific libraries which are very community dependent. Deploy Jupyter Notebooks which are customized to the needs. So this is typically a co-design, co-development activity. And then connect it to a federated backbone, which is the EGI Federation. And today, through the EGIA's project, thanks to EC funding, we also have a part of our federation which is dedicated to EOSC users that want to use it as a work environment where they can do their co-design. In our model, this compute platform is a continuum, which is integrating also HPC capacity, high-throughput computing capacity. And all of this is available through workflow management systems, which make the distribution transparent to the users. This is a very powerful mechanism. Why? Because this federation can be expanded to commercial providers as well. And for example, we are doing this with the Copernicus DIAS initiatives. We have activities with Cloudafaro and T-Systems in a project which is also part of the 07 family of EOSC. So this means, for example, that with this model, you don't have as a single research infrastructure in ENVRI to do your own integration with a DIAS, but you can use a generic integration of a data and computer facility like DIAS, bringing Copernicus data, and this would be as part of the federation available to the Jupyter notebooks. Moving to the second area, and now I'm focusing on Jupyter notebooks specifically. There is a very important complexity in the ENVRI community, which is the ability of integrating data coming from different arrays. And I think this is the challenge, because in the context of a single array, you have already your developed environment and resources available. So the complexity is for a user that has its own data to be integrated with array data and have an infrastructure which is cross-array where this can be enabled. So what we can do thanks to the nodes and the federation is, I've already explained a bit the notebooks and the compute part, but I like to show how the notebooks can integrate with distributed data. EGI Federation has also a federated data platform where data can be hosted if the community has no in-house capacity for doing this. So you can mirror your own data into this federated infrastructure, which is fully collocated with the compute resources. But for example, if you have a user with data in B2Drop, with UDAT, we integrated notebooks, so you can use B2Drop if that's your reference platform to ingest data in notebooks and deposit the data as an output. We have been doing these integrations with a number of different scientific communities. And the power is that this data layer is federated, so a research infrastructure can bring its own data as well. So the complexity and the power of the notebooks as we deliver it in EGI is that the notebook can, if we have interoperability, of course, in the APIs, can tap into data which is physically distributed but seamlessly discoverable in your notebook application. There was a mention yesterday about Binder, so I want to bring this up. Actually, it was Panos mentioning this, but this is another important example of open science, and in this case, integration with OpenAir. So with the notebooks of EGI, you have a Binder already integrated, which means as a scientist, of course, you publish your data and you can publish your notebook. You can push through GitHub your notebook into Zenodo and use this as a digital object that can be discovered by the notebook. And Binder can import the notebooks which are available in Zenodo or potentially other notebook repositories, so that if you want to reuse a notebook from another scientist which is discovered through the DOI, through OpenAir, you can do this in an integrated workflow and environment. And this is my last slide. It's an element which perhaps deserves more consideration. I haven't seen this mentioned today so far, but it's coordinated technical support. And I think data analytics and VRE is obviously for EGI a very important area of common interest. So we see EOSC as a powerful tool where competency coming from the research infrastructures that have a very intimate knowledge of the data and the applications, and infrastructures like EGI can work together to have customized Jupyter notebooks integrated with data infrastructures like UDAT or OpenAir for discovery and Zenodo. So having the ability in EOSC of connecting these expert teams, when we have communities that want to come to EOSC can use different assets, but also different expertise. This human component of EOSC should not be forgotten. So I'm not clear today how this can be organized, but the coming calls are definitely an area where we can put in place the processes to make it happen. So with this, I've completed my presentation, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Tiziana, for your very spot-on presentation. Last but not least, the CEO of OpenAir, Natalia Manola. Welcome.
Okay, so it's the one from 1022.
This is
Natalia.
Oh, it doesn't show. That's fine. Okay.
Oh, that's Holy Grail.
It's okay.
Holy Grail.
Yes, it's the Holy Grail, as we said. Okay, I will try also to be as short as possible and focus on the questions that they were posed. So, just a few facts and truths. Okay, so no animation, which is So this is open science. I'm not going to say the why and the what and how, but what we know is that open science is here to stay. We know that open science is multifaceted. It's not just open access to data, publication, or that. So that means is that we need lots of expertise from different organizations, and that we know that open science is costly. So this is about sharing resources, sharing knowledge, sharing know-how. Then in the OpenAir, what we have, our mode of operation is as EGI and the other e-infras, mainly on the national institutional approach. What we consider now, especially as EOSC is put in place and member states are putting a lot of effort at national infrastructure, this is where we happen. And I think the key thing with the key question with the research infrastructures is how we combine the thematic and the national, where you also have national nodes, right? So where do we do that? So then open science requires a holistic approach. So we cannot see open science like open data or open publications, but it's open data linked to open publications, linked to FAIR. So it's everything connected together. And at the end of the day is if we wanted to make it happen, we need to have to look at the whole, a holistic approach and how researchers view open science. So the thing is, the truth is that we cannot do that unless we work together, okay? And sustainability is a thorny issue because, why? It brings lack of trust, it brings lack of collaboration. So I think, what we need to do is to find common approaches, what works, the low-hanging fruit, or maybe try it out a few things. But at the end of the day, it's about willingness, how much are we willing to cooperate, and, how we can put efforts, because we can talk about sharing effort and know-how, but at the end of the day, we need to have a work plan. So I will just present brief things about open-air services, focusing on how it can be done on ENVRI-FAIR. So, in a nutshell, we have planning and tracking for open science. So we have this, what I would say, we're not data centers, we're not storage, we don't deal with that. But what we deal is with open science. So our services are about planning and tracking, it's about discovering, it's about assessing and monitoring. I think, and this is of very much of interest to how ENVRI-FAIR is going towards, approaching the open science and for every other cluster. So how do we start? First of all, it's about interoperability. So in open-air, we are a consortium since 2005. We became more established in Europe from the Horizon, FP7 Horizon, open access to publications, and we became a legal entity since 2018. But these open-air guidelines, what we started them in 2005, and we call them guidelines. They came from repositories of institutions for publications, but even on repositories on publications, there was the difficulty of metadata. Okay, so these are about metadata and guidelines of best practices on how to export your, whatever you're creating. So we have worked on the open-air guidelines for literature, then we adopted the data side guidelines for data repositories. We are working with software heritage and RDA in the open-air guidelines for software repositories, other research progress, CRIS systems, Counter, which is the usage statistics, and now we're working in EOSC Future about the guidelines for training material and that we have adopted for RDA. So what we are trying to do, and I think this is an area of collaboration for all of us, is to see what is out there, what works, what doesn't work, and how can we adapt it and adopt it to our needs, and then see how our services are calibrated to that. In open-air, we can only do the horizontal, slice. We cannot go down into the very specific domain discipline. But what we can do together is to see, okay, how are these guidelines work for you, and how you can extend in order to make your services more rich. So what we are trying to say, because in EOSC we talk about integration, for us it's more about interoperation than integration. Open-air range of services. So we have a range of services that we try to cover, all of these aspects for the research. And the other thing that we are pointing out is that the services on open science are not only for researchers, are not only for infrastructures, but they are also for research managers, for universities, for policymakers. And we have this with our key assets, which is the open-air research graph. And just going into this a bit is we have the graph, which is a knowledge graph on knowledge base on scholarly communication. Before EOSC, we started with this that you are connecting with the blue lines. And then as we are more engaged into EOSC, you can see that we are extending this graph with additional stuff, citations, usage data, services, APCs, notebooks. So all of this graph is getting richer. Now, why is this graph for us very, very key? Because, first of all, it's not only European. We're working on a global level. Then it's a graph that is based on open science principles. So this is something that this is our motto. Open APIs, authoritative sources, well-established metrics. So what we are doing now is we are trying to go into this, improve the quality, because we aggregate metadata from all over the world. So that means is that for us it's a mess, and this is why we need to work on the good metadata. So we're doing that. We have global coverage, but we also have a system that is enriching the graph with AI processes. Now with FAIR Core for EOSC, we're moving towards a smart discovery. So how can you do the intelligent, now we have a keyword search. How can we do that more intelligent? And what we want to do here is what we would like to work with the ENVRI-FAIR HUB, whatever you're building the catalogs or whatever your RIs are building, and see how can we interoperate, how can you take advantage of the processes that we have, because this is a very costly process. And how can you take ownership of some of these perhaps AI things that you could do for your own community, that you can take ownership of, making sure that the metadata is correct. This is the kind of the interaction that we would like to have with you. But for what is certain for OpenAIRE is that we cannot delve into your domain. We cannot, okay? So this is the portfolio of services that we have. I will just go and highlight the ones that I think are key or could be of key to ENVRI-FAIR. The first line is mainly what we would consider to be in the EOSC core. Okay. Second line is what we consider for researchers or for working with infrastructures. And third line is mainly working, with organizations, RFOs or RPOs. So I will not go on the OpenAIRE graph. I will not go into provide, because provide, this morning we were talking with Paolo, provide is the way that repositories or any content source enters into OpenAIRE. So we have a validation, we have a registration, we have everything with the dashboard. And what we were thinking is that, in the cases of research infrastructures, could we clone provide to a local thing? So this is something that we would like to talk to you, is because if you have provide and if we agree on some common metadata schema, then you take ownership of the curation as they come in. We give you the dashboards, everything, and automatically everything appears in OpenAIRE and in EOSC. So there is no, forget about, I had some animation. The broker here is a service where we have the enriched OpenAIRE graph, and then you can subscribe to it and you can get back the information that is of interest to you. So you can have a metadata that is not rich enough or that is wrong, or so you can subscribe and get it back. You have the metadata validator. Now we're working on it, which is going to be kind of fair assessment at the light level, where you can have it deployed locally. Usage counts is where we measure the clicks and downloads of the data. Zenodo. Argos is our data management plan tool, which is machine actionable or machine readable and actionable. And what we would like to work with ENVRI and the RIs of ENVRI, we have the dataset templates. We don't work by DMP templates. We have the dataset templates. So when a user comes at the university and gets a data management plan, is that they can pick one of the dataset templates that you somehow configure, and we just guide them to your infrastructure or to the fairness. So this is something that we could talk in the next calls. We have Amnesia, which is anonymization and can do very nice geolocation anonymization if needed. I don't know what are the things. And then we have connect and monitor. Especially monitor for you is where what we find is that research infrastructures are lacking the monitor of who is using what. So what data is being produced, what data is being published, what publications are being, because somebody's using the ENVRI-FAIR or the whatever services or infrastructures. So this is the kind of services that we have. And how do we place ourselves in EOSC? This is something, I think I went over it a bit, but what we have in that side is, is the ingestion of data sources and the research products into OpenAIRE, which we considered to be part of EOSC. So how can we work together there? And I think this is what we, Paolo is trying to do in WP4. Everything is on the graph, EOSC graph, OpenAIRE graph, whatever. It's just that OpenAIRE is a global graph where EOSC, I really don't know what it is. And then you have the services which can be explored, which can be monitoring, connect, of course this. And now with one new project, we're going to go and construct open science profiles and assessment. So GRASP OS will be built on the OpenAIRE research graph. And then what we will do is we have already some communities involved. It's not, I don't think one of the ENVRI communities is involved, in order to see what does it mean to have an open science profile? Because Europe is going to this new research assessment thing. So what they want is, some metrics. I don't know how they will be using these metrics, but we want to see, how this, how we can offer the infrastructure for them. And then, as Tiziana said, last slide, it's not about, just the services. So, you have people, and we have people, okay? So how can we make them work together? For us, we have our national open access desks who, people knock on their door and say, how do I do this? How do I do that? It could be on Horizon Europe proposals, or it could be on funding that now the national infrastructure, the national funders have, and they are putting open science. So, how can we tell our offices that, okay, if this is about an environment thing, probably you should lead them to guide them to this. So this is the way. And then in training support, I'm not sure how support is, because Tiziana touched on it. I'm not sure how support should be structured in, that we collaborate. But apart for training, what we are now doing in OpenAIRE, in the past 10 years, we have been using training, and trained more than 15,000 people. But what we are doing now is, stepping back and say, how can we focus on quality? So we want to produce modules for open science that are more qualitative, that we can, delegate to others. These others can be at the universities, these others can be at the research infrastructures. We don't know who the others are, but as it's shaping on, we are focusing on doing this, these more focusing on qualities. So we have the training boot camps. We're going to have twice, 2 of them every year. We have the community of practice for training. And now what we are doing is we are embarking on this collaboration, we're embarking on training on Horizon Europe, including Marie Curie. So how many of them are, environment related? We have no idea. We're just doing our usual training, but it would be nice to see that if we have something, a Marie Curie program that is around environment, we can work with you. So this is the kind of collaboration that I think. And of course, I haven't answered anything about sustainability, because, we are there, at least for us, we are there to move on. So as Santi said, because it's important for you to know that, is that we have 15 members. We are expanding now, so we know that it's going to be expanded because many universities and many institutions want to join, but it's mainly the national infrastructures, organizations that participate in the national infrastructure. And I think, this is the strong point of collaboration. Thank you.